Welcome back into Good Parenting Radio. Dawn Schiller is the author of The Road Through Wonderland, Surviving John Holmes, and she joins us here right now. Thank you for being with us, Dawn.
Thanks a lot.
You have an amazing story. We've been talking off air here for quite a little bit about your story, and I wanted to bring you in for a parenting show here because I think for a lot of us, we worry about our communication with our kids. I have young kids, I've been telling you, 9 and 5 years old, and as they get older, I know that the communication we share now is a lot of what's going to be built up later in their lives. And although we have what I would consider a relatively stable home environment, I think in the back of every parent's mind, there's this fear of when they get to that rebellious phase, when they get older, will they want to run away? Will we reach this conflict point that will break the bond that we build up over their young years?
Right.
Your story is quite different than that. I mean,
Right.
you grew up in an amazing, and I don't mean amazing in a great way, an amazing young life that led to an even more amazing and crazy adult life, and
Right.
finally to a point where you are just doing incredible work for teens that maybe face some of the same circumstances you faced. Give me just a little bit of background on your story, if you would.
On my story, well, we were talking earlier. My story it's actually very common, but it wasn't perfect. It was definitely a dysfunctional family. My father was gone. He was an absent father. He's a Vietnam War vet, so I mean, I'm not making excuses for him, but he came back from the war and then immediately left with some lie about, making more money. And so as kids, we were abandoned by him. My mother's a German national, and she was stuck raising 3 kids and having to take on several jobs just to raise us as a single mom. She was bitter and she was angry. We were in trouble a lot. We were beat a lot. And that was our life. That was our childhood.
And I agree, you're not making excuses for him, but he served multiple tours of duty.
Yes.
Was exposed very much to Agent Orange. And
Yes.
even in just the work he was doing,
Yes.
was it a gunnery?
He was a door gunner in Pleiku, and he did some serious action time.
Does that mean he stood on the open door of the helicopter shooting from the air?
Yes. If you ever saw the movie We Were Soldiers with Mel
Mhm,
Gibson,
mhm.
that exact battle was the battle that he was at.
You wrote in the book that the average life of the gunnery doorman was 7 days.
7 days.
And he went through multiple tours of duty.
He did 2 tours. hmm
So he was messed up.
He was
He
messed
was messed
up.
up when he came back. And he traveled a lot, was always off finding a new job, was going to send money back, was making you guys move.
Right.
You had a somewhat tranquil life in New Jersey.
Right.
And then when he finally came back one time, said, let's move to Florida. I'm
Mhm.
guessing that was because there was going to be work down there.
Yes.
Life was going to be better.
Yes.
And that's when things really began to unravel.
Right. Right.
What happened when you got to Florida?
When we got to Florida, Dad left. It wasn't enough for him. He couldn't settle. He was a lot of PTSD. He was suffering a lot of stuff, and he decided that he was going to go to Iran and make money as a telephone man. And he took off and just didn't come back. And
Was he sending money all along?
he started to, and then it stopped. It stopped, and we didn't know what happened to him. We thought he died. Years later, we got a pieced together letter from him from Thailand saying he was in a Thai jail, and asked us if we could send him money to help him get out.
And your mom did that,
She did
despite
that.
all she had been through.
Yep, she did that even after not hearing from him, after struggling to keep us together and not lose the home and feed us. We were very poor, very, very poor.
The story from there, you're living now in Florida. Your mom. What's interesting to me, I guess, is that while this is, as I'm reading this is fantastical. This is, this doesn't really happen. This is written for the movies, but it's not. It's what really happened to you.
Yes.
But the correlation, I think, is for your mom. While it's hopefully harsher than what most people go through, a lot of marriages end in divorce.
A lot
And
of
it ends up
divorce.
being a mom home with the kids most of the time. And I
Mhm.
know too many people right
Mhm.
now who are going through somewhat similar situations where after a couple of kids, his husband suddenly decides there's something else in life. It's generally another woman. He moves out, becomes a very part-time dad.
Mhm.
And the mom is at home with the kids 85% of the time.
Right.
Now she's maybe back in the workforce that she was out of or more full-time than she was. And the kids, this is an interesting thing in your life. You guys loved your dad.
Yeah.
Despite all the time he was gone, despite
Right.
how rarely he came back, despite all the broken promises.
Right.
He comes back. You guys are flying out that door, jumping into his arms.
Yep.
And your mom, as tough on you as she was and everything, she probably felt she had to do, and not excusing everything, but forced into the situation she didn't ask for.
Right.
Then you guys love dad so much when he comes home and you decide to leave with dad. And I
Mm.
read that and think about what moms face today in a lot of these
Yeah,
situations.
it broke her heart. I can see that now, as an adult, I can look back and I can see how it broke her heart. And, my father, like you said, was a Vietnam War vet. He was a hero to us kids. Why he was gone, we were always aching for him. Where was he? Where was our father? We all, we didn't want to accept that he had abandoned us. But the truth is, he had another woman.
The rest of the book
Hmm.
deals with what happens next.
Right.
And you moving to California, just how your life spirals out of control from there. John Holmes, a famous adult movie star at the time, and everything that happens, and it just gets worse.
Hmm.
Um, that's all in the book, and people should read that because I think it's certainly a warning for parents today about what happens with kids, and that we can't, the term throwaway teens is out there, and you work to stop this from happening to kids today, to fall into the same traps you fell into.
Right.
What are how are these kids created these days? I mean, are families falling apart and kids are falling, or is it in suburban homes where there's a divorce, or maybe even not? Maybe it's just parents that aren't, working with their kids in the right ways, that kids then fall into dabbling in drugs and things spiral out of control from there. What are you seeing from the kids you work with today?
Well, the term throwaway, which I can't stand, by the way, and I don't think anybody really can, because I don't believe anybody should be a throwaway. It's really a condition that you feel. It's a state of being, and that's what I felt like was a kid. I felt like I was just really a burden. I didn't, nobody really was looking out for me. I didn't know where to go. But in my home environment, and the throwaway today would be somebody or a kid surviving neglect or abuse on some level. Abuse is all kinds of things, can be verbal, emotional, psychological, physical, sexual. Sadly enough to say, there's a lot of those things going on. And, that kind of stuff can cause the consequence for that is the kid will either stay at home because they're petrified to do anything else and just try to, survive, or they will, hang out at friends' houses. They'll run away. They'll try to find another place to crash, or couch hop a lot of times happens, or they will end up homeless.
The kids who end up out on the road on their own, runaways. I don't know if I'm looking for solace for parents to think that's not going to happen to us, because I don't want us to think that way, because
Wow.
that's a trap to fall into. But is it socioeconomic? Is it? I mean, who are the kids who are most at risk for this?
Well, abuse can happen in every,
Right.
economic stratosphere.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
can, you can't really gauge that. So, I mean, it depends on what's going on at home. It really does. A lot of times, very wealthy kids will end up being in the throwaway category because their parents are just not around. They're not present.
Right.
They just allow them to survive on their own. And I mean, every kid needs to be guided. Every kid needs to be guided, and that's what I will say. I will say that parents, there is good news. I mean, parents who stay involved with their kids, I don't believe to be friends, but to be a parent.
Yeah.
And you know what? And learn how to listen, learn how to communicate with your kids, but also be the rules.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the friendship thing, because that's really how your dad seems to get back in with you. I mean,
Didn't work.
he's all excited you have pot. Now you guys are buddies. And to you at the time, this must have looked like, this is, you said in the book, Dad is cool. This is great.
Right.
And it ends up just being probably the worst thing that could have happened.
Absolutely the worst thing, because he didn't care. He was, talk about neglect. He just was in his own world. He did have a really radical surgery at the time, too, as a result from Agent Orange. He had part of his face and nose his whole nose cut off, and was bandaged up and was very sick. So really, I mean, how could I blame him for, not caring? I almost wanted to care for him. I mean, not almost, I did. So it was a reverse situation. And that, again, in today's world, today's kids, there could be a disability at home where, the roles are reversed. And then that kid who still needs somebody to guide them into adulthood is left not knowing how to get there.
The websites to visit for Dawn, empowerteens.com, and that's where you have a lot of the information about the speaking you do to teens.
Correct. And that is a lot of information on what a throwaway teen is, their vulnerabilities. And we're hoping to get way more content on there. So just keep tapping in.
You can find the book at roadthroughwonderland.com, or buy the book. That would be even better, probably. And dawn-schiller.com. All three websites available at goodparentingradio.com as well. Dawn, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.